Hey everybody, Chris here, and welcome to another episode of Cardboard Dragon Reviews. Today we're doing something a little different for the channel. We're going to look at a digital version of a board game. And not just any board game, this is Twilight Struggle, which for a long time was a #1 rated game on Board Game Geek until Pandemic Legacy came along and kicked it out. It's still #2 rated. It's been highly rated for a long time. The #1 rated war game on the site. So this is a game I don't actually own the physical copy for. I never really got into it for a couple main reasons. One is a two-player only game, which I don't own that many of, and that's just simply because I don't play that many two-player games. We usually have at least 3 people to play, so two-player games don't get played that much. And also it seemed like a very intimidating game, like hearing that it's a war game, I kind of had a perception in my head of what that might entail, and just the pictures of it looked a little scary to me. So I saw this for sale on the Steam service on my PC, and saw 2 things. One, it had a tutorial, and 2, it offered offline play against AI opponents, so I thought, hey, that would be a good way to get in and see what this game actually is. So essentially what this game is a war, if you will, Cold War between the USA and the USSR. You can see here the years of the war represented here are 45 to 89. One player is going to take on the side of the Americans and the other of the Soviets. And it's sort of an area control, but really more of a hand management game. So we'll go in here in a minute and look at what this game actually is. I also want to mention, I saw one of the designers for this game was Ananda Gupta, and I knew that name from somewhere, thinking, where do I know this guy from? So he was a designer on the video game kind of reboot, if you will, of XCOM a few years ago, which is one of my favorite video games, so that was pretty sweet. So let's just look at the menus here first. So we have an offline play mode where you can play against a bot, if you will, and we can see we have one going here already. So it saves your game in between games, so if you wanted to come back to it later you could. You could have multiple on the go at a time. Here's the tutorial, which I think is very good. I'll say it taught me how to play, but it didn't really teach me how to play well, and by that I mean the strategy of what is a good move, what are good things to do, because there's so much to learn in this game, and I still don't think, after I don't know, about 5 games of this, I still don't think I really grasp what is ideal play in this game. You have stats that'll track your wins for you. There's also an online mode to play, but you have to create an account to do that, so I haven't done that yet, and I'd probably get stomped online, so I'm not really terribly interested in that yet. And then here's some of the options you have. It's not very heavy on anything, just because it's not a very taxing game. There's limited animations and stuff. We can look at all the cards in the game through here. There's the rule book you can also look at. So if you ever wanted to know what a realignment roll is, you can come back and check it out here. So let's go ahead and let's get into a game, and excuse me, we'll take a look at what's happening here. So we just finished what's called the headline phase, where we both had to play a card for an event. So Soviet player's going, but while he's doing that I'll talk a bit. Basically how this game is played is you have a hand of cards, and you're going to have to play most of them on your turn. The amount you have to play changes depending on what round of the game you're in. And that's really the crux of the game, is playing these cards. Now, these cards are interesting because they come in basically 3 different types. They come in cards that have the white star here. Those are American cards, so the event on the card will be good for Americans. There's Soviet cards, which have the red star, so the event on the card is good for Soviets. And then there are these neutral cards, which are half white, half red, and they're good for whoever plays that card. And then we also have the scoring cards, which is how scoring happens. So there's a few ways that the game ends. You can win the game if you manage to score 20 points. Right now we're at even score, and the scoring in this game is super interesting. I can't really show it to you on here, it doesn't do a good job of that, but essentially what it is like a tug of war of points. So you can think of it sort of like a thermometer. So if I was to score 2 points, this counter would move up to 2 US. And then if the Soviet player scored 1 point, the score would move down from 2 US to 1 US. So we keep score on the same track. And we're both trying to push and pull things to like our end of the thermometer, if you will, but it keeps moving up and down depending on who scores points. The other way the game can end is if you end up on nuclear war on your turn. This DEFCON status goes down depending on some aggressive military actions you might take. And there's also the Europe scorecard, which if you control all the battleground countries in a region, which are these red-backed ones, you will instantly win the game. So, back to the cards. What's really interesting about these cards, when you have to basically play one card a turn, you have to do it. Even if it won't be good for you, you still have to do it. What's really interesting about this game is you play the card in basically one of two ways. For, let's say, when it's your card, like here, this is my American card, I can play the card either for this number up here, which is a military operations points, or I can play it for the event. When I am playing a card that is, and that's the same also with the neutral cards, the same rules apply to that. However, I'm going to have to play Soviet cards on some point in my turn, because we are all drawing from the same deck of cards. Both the Soviet player and myself are drawing from the same deck, so it's likely in his hand of cards here, he probably has American cards too. So when you have a Soviet card and you have to play it, you play it for the military ops points, in this case 1, but the event still happens. So for me using this card, I get 1 mil op point, which I can do something with, and I'll talk about that in a second. But the Soviet player is getting a benefit of this event going off, which can be devastating. So what this game at its heart is like aversion management, pain management. Bad things are going to happen to you. You need to mitigate that in as best a way as possible. For instance, like we look at this card on the text here, unless a US player immediately discards a 3 or more value operations card, eliminate all US influence in West Germany. Right now, I have a 3 ops card, so I could get rid of it to cancel this negative event. So that's an example of mitigating the bad stuff that's going to happen. So when you play an event, you just pick a card and play the event, and it will resolve for you. Whatever the card says. When you want to use the points, however, you have a few options. So we would have 3 points to use. We can do that to place influence, to realign, to coup, or to do the space race. So we'll talk about placing influence. So these countries are divided into either battleground countries, which are more important. They're the red-backed ones. Like we see West Germany here is one, Poland is one, Czechoslovakia is not one because it doesn't have the red back. And what this number here, a little number here like West Germany's 4, is a stability number. So once you have that many more influence points in a country than your opponent, you take control of that country. So just as an example, it's not a good move, but let's go ahead and we went place influence. We have 3 influence to place. Let's add a couple to France and watch what happens here when I add a 3rd one, because I have 3 more than the Soviet player. I now have control of that country. So you can only add influence points to countries you're connected to in some way. So if I want to add to Czechoslovakia, you can see it's saying no, you can't do that because you're not connected, which you can tell by these lines in the board here. So for instance, I couldn't just go right into Nigeria and start adding influence because I am not connected to it in any way. So I'll undo that. So that's placing influence. And what's interesting, once you control a country, it costs your opponent 2 points instead of 1 to add influence into it. So for me, let's go ahead and do that again just so I can show you. To add influence into East Germany, you can see it cost me 2 influence to add just that one single point into East Germany. So that's placing influence. Let's go ahead and I'll show you what a coup is. So a coup is a way to basically try and flip a country. At least you want to get rid of your opponent's influence in it, but ideally you want to flip it into your control. So you pick a card, you go to coup, and you can coup any country that has their influence in it. Now, coupping a country that's a battleground country will decrease the DEFCON level. And you can see when the DEFCON level goes down, there's certain times you can't coup anything. So for instance, at this drop down, we couldn't coup or realign in Europe. So the way a coup works, let's go to coup Syria. You can see it does all the bookkeeping for you here. So how would you figure this out in your head? So if you want to coup a country, you double its stability number, and then you take your ops points number, in this case 3, and add it to a die roll. And the difference between the doubled stability number and your die roll plus the mil ops number, that's the difference. They lose influence in the difference, and you gain influence with the rest of the difference. So you could see here, if I roll a 4, if I rolled a 6, I would have a total value of 9. He would have a total value of 4, so it's a difference of 5. So he would lose this one, and I would gain this 4, which is what this is telling me here. Okay, so that's a coup. A realignment is a little different. Realignment is a way to only lower the influence in other countries. This is one of the things I'm still not sure when it's a good idea to do it. There's modifiers like to the dice roll that gets made depending on what countries are around that you control and stuff like that, but it'll only remove influence from the country. But at the same time, you get to make multiple rolls. So in this case, we would make 3 realignment rolls in a turn instead of just like one roll with the coup. And then the other thing you can do is space race a card. So we can see here, it's at the top here. Next project needs to be a value of 2 or higher, 2 ops, and then I have to discard that card and roll a 1 to 3, and then I move up in this space race, which gives me points or other things as I go. So this is a good way to get rid of bad cards in your hand, because these, when you play it to a space race, it's completely discarded. The event doesn't go off. Now some of these cards you can see are removed from play if ever used as an event, and so they're never reshuffled into the deck when the deck runs out. Other ones, and we don't have any yet, have like a red underline, and they affect the game later. Like there's one called the Marshall Plan, which then later in the game lets you play NATO, for instance. So as the game progresses in turns, we get to like the mid-war here. After the 3rd turn, more cards are added, and on the 8th turn, the late war cards are added. So we keep getting more and more cards in our deck. Now what's also interesting is these scoring cards. Like I said, this is how points are scored. You basically get points depending on what you control in a region versus what your opponent controls. So you can see, it says right on the bottom there, you cannot hold these cards between rounds. You have to play them during a round or you automatically lose the game. And it's very good at warning you, like, you play this now or you're going to lose, so you should probably play it, kind of thing. So that helps you strategize. Like Middle East and Europe would be priorities for me. We saw he played the Asia scoring card right at the beginning of the game. I don't know if that's a good thing to do or not, but we know now that Asia scoring card has been played, so Asia will not be scored again until the deck gets reshuffled, and we can kind of time that out a little bit by looking at some of the information that's given to us here. 19 in the draw pile. So that's kind of a very brief overview of how you play. It's actually not a very difficult game to play, but like I said, the amount of strategy in this, I still don't really comprehend when I'm doing something good. I have won a couple games and I've lost a couple games, um, and I'm starting to understand now. Like I'm starting to see um, things that I should be doing or ways I can kind of combo my cards together, and I've been able to anticipate a couple cards that he is going to play. Because there aren't that many cards in the deck, so you kind of see them after you play a few games. You kind of seen a lot of them, so you know what to expect, especially in the early war, because those are the ones you see the most. I just love this hand management thing of you're gonna need to play these cards and they're gonna do bad things for you. So it's how do I get out of this with the least bad thing happening to me. So that's just super cool, and it does feel like a struggle. Like when I get done playing a full game of this, which on computer seems to take me like an hour, 1 to 2 hours to play, and that's if I'm really thinking about it 2 hours. But I feel like I get like a mind workout. Like my head is like, oh, that was a lot of thinking that went into playing this game. Now, what's interesting, let's just back out here, is if we create a game, we can see that the computer is set to easy. I have no idea how you change this. I have not been able to find a way of changing this, and from what I've read on the forums, it is not possible to change the computer from being easy difficulty. Right now, it's still pretty challenging for me. In the future, though, I don't know if that will be the case anymore. I can't really comment on that yet because I haven't played enough games, but there's always the online mode for you to go into if you want to. Be really challenged by other people who probably have played a lot of this game. Now, I also need to show you there are some other things you can do here, like you can play the Chinese Civil War mode or the late war mode, which are explained, I believe, in the rule book what those are. There's some optional cards you can add in or not. You can also adjust the handicap, so you can play random sides, or you can put yourself on USSR if you want to. But yeah, this game has really made me want to pick up the physical version of this game and find somebody and just track them down and be like, yeah, we need to play this because this game is awesome. I see why this game was sitting at #1 for such a long time. The amount of strategy in this is just incredible, and it's deceptively easy to understand what you're doing. You could watch somebody play, like, let's say 20 minutes of a game, and I think you'd have a pretty good understanding of exactly what's going on. But that tutorial does a really good job of explaining things to you pretty clearly. And you can always go back to the rulebook and look at it if you need to. Now, I did experience a couple bugs. The game would lock up at that transition screen when it said it was my turn. It wouldn't transition to this screen where I'm able to do things. So I just had to exit the game and load back up, and I hadn't lost any progress. And so it wasn't that big of a deal, but I needed to mention that those things did happen to me. Another weird thing, and let's just do this just so we can, let's coup something just for the heck of it so I can show you what I'm talking about. Probably not a good move, but let's coup Iraq. So this is the dice rolling. That was me rolling the dice, which is not very satisfying. I just got a picture of what the dice roll was. Like, I wish it had some sort of an animation there. But at the same time, it just did all the bookkeeping for me, gave me a good idea what my odds were, which is super nice, especially for somebody who's new to this game. So overall, I think this game is amazing. This is a 10 out of 10 for me. I want to get the physical version. I want to play with somebody who's also sort of new at this game, who's not going to just stomp me into the ground like I feel like would happen if I went online. Because like I said, I played, I think, 4 or 5 games, and I still wouldn't have a great grasp as to what's going on. I've been trying to play now as the Soviets instead of the Americans, so there's some different strategy that goes in depending on what side you're playing on. So I really recommend checking this game out, watching a couple people play a little bit, and seeing if it's something you're into. Because I could see some people thinking this is a pretty dry game. It's just numbers. You know, there's no big battles that happen or something. But there are some pretty intense battles back and forth that happen when you're fighting over certain territories. Like my last game as the USSR, I won with the Europe scoring card because I dominated Europe, and we had some influence battles going on between ourselves over France, which was the last country that I needed to hold, and was able to hold France out long enough to be able to play that scoring card myself. So this was $17 Canadian, I want to say. So that's like 50 cents American or something. If you want to pick it up, but it's a fairly inexpensive game. And it's definitely a classic in the board gaming world. There's a reason it was rated so highly for such a long time, and still is. And still is. So this has the highest of recommendations for me. So this has been Chris for Cardboard Dragon Reviews. Let me know if you enjoy these kind of digital board game reviews. I see there's some more board games on Steam. I didn't even know that that was a thing that was happening. So if you want to see some more of those, let me know. And until next time, keep your dice on the table.